Hey, I'm Bettina. Welcome to this video on how to know when you're in labour. First of all, I 100% remember Googling this very question when I was pregnant, especially with my first, because so much of your first pregnancy is spent wondering when you're going to go into labour, how it will happen, imagining how it will happen. Personally, I was really interested in knowing when I was in labour because I was actually living an hour and a half away from hospital, so I was like, when do I go? And feeling quite anxious about that. So if you are new here, welcome. My name is Bettina Ray. I'm a yoga teacher and I specialise in yoga for fertility, pregnancy, birth and early motherhood. If you're interested in some yoga for pregnancy or for birth specifically, I'll link my free guide below so that you can go and download that one. Otherwise, let's get into the answer. How do you know when you are in labour? Annoyingly, the answer to this question is you'll know, which I know sucks when you are a first-time mum and when you're pregnant for the very first time, because you're like, but how will I know? Like, what's going to happen to my body? So we're going to go through those things, signs to look out for, but at the heart of it, you really will know. And when you find yourself going, am I in labour yet? Chances are you're not, because if you have that time to question it and you're like, is this it? Is this not it? The chances are probably not quite. It's probably your body preparing for labour, but it's probably not in active labour yet. When you're in active labour, you're like in it. You can't focus on anything else. You're definitely not Googling, am I in labour, when you're in active labour. I probably should put a little disclaimer on this video as well before we get started. This may be a little TMI, but I'm going to guess by the fact that you are looking into this topic and you're looking for information, you're well over that and prepared for some talk about the facts of the body when you are pregnant and giving birth. Before I get into some of those things that can tell you if you are in labour or not, can I just say, if you're asking this question because you're thinking, should I call my midwife or my doctor? Should I go into hospital? My answer to that is, if you are uncomfortable being at home still, feel like you need to be at hospital, if you're just feeling unsure, just ring, just go in. The worst that can happen is they can send you home and that's totally fine. I remember I used to be so concerned with not being a bother or not wanting to go in too early. And honestly, if you're worried, go in, let them allay your fears, let them put them to rest, especially if it's in the middle of the night, then you can at least get some sleep when you come home. And I think it's always worthwhile, if you're worried or uncomfortable, to go in and get checked anyway. All right, so some of the signs and symptoms of labour. Obviously, there are kind of different stages of labour. So you sort of have like pre-labour where the body's just getting ready. You'll have some contractions, you could have backache, you could start to have some discharge, which you might start noticing in the weeks leading up to labour as well. So pre-labour tends to be contractions on and off. They don't regularly build to anything. And you can kind of keep going about your day or your night or whatever routine you're in. And you don't have to stop and physically focus on the contractions. And then we get into early labour where often the contractions start to build. They're not consistent and regular just yet, but they are starting to get moving. So usually the difference between that real pre-labour stage, I notice that a lot of women get the sort of maybe mid-afternoon, they'll get a few contractions for a few hours. It feels like, yes, we're on, this is labour. And then they go to bed and it peters out. And this can happen for a few weeks, annoyingly, leading up to birth. But it's just your body practicing getting ready. Early labour can have very similar signs in the body in that you start contracting and it's starting to build up. It's not active labour yet though, so you'll know you're in active labour when it's building, building, building and there's no relief. Each contraction feels like it's getting stronger, longer, with shorter periods of rest in between each contraction. It takes your whole focus, your whole awareness, and you just need to be on and in the zone for active labour. So that's kind of the difference between early labour. In my experience with my births, in early labour, that's when I've gone, yep, this is happening. Is this labour though? Is this really labour though? And I find myself questioning. But once you get into active labour, there's no questioning anymore. You're like, yeah, no, I know this is happening. It's happening now. And for me, active labour tends to be quite short. With my second birth, it was mostly just all active labour. It was like my waters broke, I had a couple of contractions. I was sort of thinking, is this it? An hour later, bam, it was on. 2 hours later, he was here. So another sign might be that you have a bloody shock or you lose the mucus plug. And this can sometimes be a bit confronting or a little bit like, oh, I'm feeling a bit worried, because you're like, is my baby okay? Is this normal and natural? So of course, if you're feeling really worried, go into the hospital, get checked out. Maybe they will say, yep, all perfect. go home and rest. Maybe it does end up being a couple of days before you end up in hospital, but at least this way you can feel relaxed and not stressed, because you don't want to be stressed going into labor. It's going to prolong the experience. If you are stressed and tight and fearful, it's telling your nervous system that it's not safe to give birth. So your body will naturally slow labor down. So if you're feeling really fearful, go and get checked out so that you can feel safe and start relaxing, and you can labor at home for a little bit longer. That's perfectly okay. Never feel afraid to go and ask for help if you feel like you need it. So obviously another sign that you are actually in labor is the contractions are regular, stronger, and they're getting closer together. So they'll be building and you'll feel that build. I know for me, mine can sort of go on and off and a little bit patchy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in labor, but it's not really happening. And then boom, it's like on and it's building, and you will feel that difference when it starts to build consistently. Obviously your waters breaking is a sign that you're going into labor, though it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen straight away. So with my first boy, my waters were broken, which is a whole other story, one that I really regret allowing to be done. For my second boy, I got out of bed and my waters broke, and active labor started about an hour later. And then for my most recent birth with Luca, I was lying in bed, my waters broke. It was about another 4 or 5 hours after that before active labor started. So I was definitely having contractions, but they were quite irregular. And I actually put that down to, I was feeling a little bit fearful about getting to hospital on time because my second birth was so fast. I was also a little bit fearful because I'd experienced losses between that second birth and this one. And so there was just a bit of tension there, I think. And it wasn't until I got to hospital, I'd been put on the monitors and the monitors had been taken off, that I started to feel like, yep, I'm okay now. And it was like, as soon as I let go and relaxed, bam, it was on, and he was born about an hour later. So it was super fast once I got into active labor. So some other signs that you might be in labor is you might have a loose bowel movement. And obviously this is hard to gauge because you can have this on and off throughout pregnancy anyway. But I know for me, just before I go into labor, so really towards the end of my pregnancy, if I notice that that really changes quite drastically and not because of something I've eaten, it's usually a sign that my body is preparing. You might get something similar around the same time as your period. I always found as well that that changed for me just before my period arrived. And it's a similar sort of thing. It's almost like the body is clearing out before your baby is about to arrive. And finally, a couple of other things. You might notice some changes in moods. I've heard of some women who've had these really drastic mood changes just before giving birth, some to really cranky, some to really energetic. You might find yourself nesting like crazy. You might find yourself exhausted or bursting with energy. And you'll notice with all of these things, they're contrasting. It's going to be different for every woman and different for every birth. I've definitely felt different leading up to every birth, and I haven't been able to successfully predict it. Yes, the point of this video is just to give you some ideas of what to look for if you're looking out for some signs and symptoms that labor is close or maybe happening for you. But yeah, I can't stress enough, most importantly, if you're feeling uncomfortable and you feel like you want to ask someone a question in real time, get yourself to your doctor or your midwife or to the hospital. Let them allay your fears, and know that you can always go home and labor at home, because we want to labor in our most comfortable environment for as long as possible, because that's how our labor and birth is going to progress the fastest and the smoothest if we're relaxed, comfortable, and at ease. So do as much as you can to make sure that's how you feel. If you'd like more information about birth and learning about how your body works during birth, I actually have a Yoga Wisdom for Birth course, so you can check that one out in my online yoga circle. I'll link that one below for you as well. So basically it was everything I wanted to know first time around. I really went into birth first time around blind. I was blinkers on, didn't want to know about it, just didn't want to think about it, which in hindsight was a bit of a mistake. Didn't have a great experience first time round, and I really wish I could go back and tell myself to do a little bit more research, learn a bit more about how my body worked. And I did that for second time round and had such a beautiful and empowering experience. So this course is just me sharing what I learned, and obviously also yoga tools that you can use during labor and birth to make the experience more enjoyable for you. All right, so that's it from me today. I would love to hear in the comments, if you've given birth before, what were some of the signs that you used to know when you were in labor? So something that really clearly sticks out in your mind is, yep, that was the first instant I knew that this is it, we're on. I would love to hear, because we're all so very different. And if you are close to giving birth yourself, best of luck. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.